Originally, my father and his partner, Mario Ilian, worked at Cosworth. My father was in charge of the DFX Cosworth Indycar engine program. The Indycar field was largely powered by the DFX engine, and Penske was certainly one of the sort of prolific teams of the time. My father and Mario approached Keith Duckworth about producing an updated version of the DFX because they felt there were several points that they could improve on, and Keith wasn't very keen for commercial reasons, which was understandable. So my father and Mario approached Roger Penske and asked him whether he would be interested in funding the development of a new IndyCar engine, which he agreed to, and Ilmor was started from there. 1994 was the only season that Ilmor ever ran an engine under their own name. So for me, if there was ever an IndyCar to own, or a car to own, I guess this would really be it. During the 94 season, it was primarily a test car, but it had its moments in the sun. It was driven by Emerson Fittipaldi. Equally important to me personally was its late season history, where it was used as a test bed for the next generation of electronics system, and it's the first Indy car that Greg Moore drove, and Greg was a young, talented guy I was privileged to work very briefly with in the late 90s, and is sorely missed. And I hadn't appreciated that he'd driven this particular chassis when I bought it, so that was quite a special thing to discover partway through the restoration. After the 94 season, it was sold to the Bettenhausen team and driven by Stefan Johanssen. In 95, when we received it, there was a significant amount of damage to some of the bodywork that was a bit perplexing, and it subsequently transpired that Gary Bettenhausen had driven it in the somewhat ill-fated US 500 of 1996 and hit the wall, which as soon as we found that footage explained a lot of the damage, but largely it was an empty shell. There was a gearbox but no engine, no coolers, no wiring, no electronics of any sort. We were quite lucky in that I found two stashes of PC23 spares around the world. One, the coolers, etc., came from Australia and were left there after either the 94 or 95 Surfers Paradise race. Items like the wishbones we had to replace. They'd been chromed, which can lead to weld failures if you use them. But luckily, A.D. Matthews, who would have produced them originally in period, was kind enough to put himself through the agony of making another set for us. Likewise, we had to have the front and rear wings replicated, but as many parts as possible are original parts. Probably the biggest challenge was the carbon work, which was in really poor shape, and a lot of it had to be reskinned. The floor, for example, is 0.2 of a millimetre thicker than it would have been in period, which is meaningless, but suddenly it looks reasonable. We spent probably more time sorting out the original carbon work than we would have done had we just replaced it, but to me it's really important to keep as many of the original bits as you possibly can. The PC23 was extremely drivable, particularly tractable off corners. Nigel Mansell became convinced that Penske were running traction control, which they absolutely were not, but there were several things that contributed to its performance off corner exit. One of them was the monobump suspension system, which is essentially a third spring system, so the two conventional springs at the rear and the two conventional springs at the front compresses the car, accelerates, but there's a third spring that stops the car hitting the ground and allows you to run slightly lower ride height, which is good aerodynamically. And the PC23 also pioneered the viscous coupling differential, which is a particularly versatile form of differential that helped lock the wheels together, the rear wheels together, out of corners in a more progressive way, and as a result the car was coupled with the power delivery characteristics of the 265D engine was very good off corners and left a few people wondering what was going on. Unfortunately, Indy cars are technologically regarded as a poor relation to Formula One, which is really quite untrue. They are slightly heavier, which is largely down to the rules and the fact they're built to take the huge impacts sustained when you crash at Indianapolis. So the suspension, for example, is steel rather than carbon, which Formula One was looking at, but I don't believe had appeared by 1994. They're V8s, they burn methanol, single turbocharger, hugely powerful compared to a Formula One car. So a Formula One car of period would have been over 700 horsepower, these are well over 800. So they accelerate at around the same rate. Being slightly heavier, they don't stop as quickly, but they make a huge amount of downforce, most of which is generated under the car rather than by wings. So overtaking was a lot easier because the air's conditioned as it goes under the car, and they're less pitch sensitive, where Formula One cars are designed to run at essentially two types of track, street circuits and natural road courses. Indy cars have four distinct disciplines. The G is extreme in these cars. On the ovals they were pulling up to 5G laterally, which is just astonishing. Places like Texas, there were problems with drivers pretty much blacking out